Hey guys, 2 Timothy chapter 2 has been our focus. We're talking about a couple of pictures that Paul gives to us of what the Christian's experience is all about. Talks about being a soldier. It's being like an athlete has been our focus for the last couple of days. Now an athlete, he says, runs to get a prize. He runs to get to the high calling of God. Now this high calling of God is great terminology, that we're striving for the crown of God's approval. Now, the high calling of Christ is very interesting. Let me read it to you. One thing I do, forgetting what is behind and straining toward what is ahead, I press on toward the goal to win the prize for which God has called me heavenward in Christ Jesus. Some of the translations use the word high calling of God. Now, this high calling is, I think, two things that we strive towards. And these are the goals for which we as athletes for Christ, these are the ones that we strive to attain. The high calling that I first of all want to talk about is the high calling of Christ-likeness. We've got to have something to strive toward. We've got to have some kind of goal that we want to achieve. And for us who are still down here on earth, Christ-likeness is that goal. We need to become more like Christ, little Jesuses every day. That we take on the image of Christ, we take on the values of Christ, we take on the motives of Christ, we take on the love that Jesus had. When we begin to take on those things, Jesus begins to be seen in us. Now this is the highest calling of a human being for those who are Christians. Christ-likeness is where it's at. Christ-likeness is all about knowing that we look a little bit more like Jesus every day in our reactions, in our responses, in our attitudes toward things around us and toward people around us. When we start taking on and looking like Jesus, we are moving in the right direction. And so Paul is encouraging us toward Christ-likeness. He says, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. He's talking about offering yourself as a living sacrifice so that you can die to the flesh and you can become more like Christ every time you do that. That's the first high calling. That is that of Christ-likeness. And that happens while we're here. But there is another higher calling. You know what I'm talking about. That higher calling when we leave this life and we go to the next. And God calls us home. I'm going to tell you, the older I get, the more I'm looking forward to this day. I'm looking forward to that day when I close my eyes here and open them in eternity. I'm looking forward to that day when I leave this world behind, because nothing in this world can satisfy. And the reason for that is that we're not made for this world. We're made for a higher calling. We're made for heaven. And we're made to live with Christ for eternity. Sometimes at night I will ponder these things and think, I wonder what that looks like. All we have is words. And sometimes our words just seem so inadequate. They seem so superficial. They seem so small when we think of what is ahead of us, the high calling of Christ. Remember the parable we spoke about with the 3 stewards? And we said to the 2 stewards, well done, good and faithful servant. Welcome now into the joy of the Lord. That's his high calling. Paul talks about it at the end of 2 Timothy when he will be called home, where he says, I will close my eyes here, open them in eternity, and I can't wait to receive the crown of righteousness that the Lord, the righteous judge, will give to me on that day. That's worth looking forward to. Don't be afraid of death, people. Don't be afraid of the things that really at the end of the day may seem ominous, but they can't really hurt you. They just graduate us as believers to a higher level, to a higher calling in heaven with Christ. For those of you who are older and those who are younger, let's start focusing our eyes upon that. Let's start journeying with a smile towards that day when we will stand in eternity to hear God say, hopefully, well done, good and faithful servant. I can't wait for it. I hope you can too. Have a great day, people. We're going to move on next week to talking about the next aspect, which is the farmer. I've got some good stuff to hope to say to you about that. But you have a good day and a great weekend. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.